an interesting thing happened when I was doing it. I found out that there were 87 million Americans that had bad credit.
Wow.
And I was shocked. And then the second number was the one that really got me. There were 45 million Americans that had no credit score at all. And I went, wait a minute. You add those two numbers, that's more than half the adult population of the U.S. had either bad credit or no credit. And so at that point, I went, okay, well, I have to start sharing this information because obviously I'm not the only one that's ever run into this problem.
Check out the website, surpasses.cashflow.com for podcasts, videos, articles, and free e-courses. If you guys have any specific questions, feel free to reach out to the team via email, and we'll get you pointed in the right direction, whether it be an educational course or information about syndication deals. If you haven't read my book, The Journey to Simple Passive Cashflow, click the link below to get a free copy. Thanks to John and the Wealth and Freedom Nexus podcast. Our team is here to help you take the first step, or if you're a seasoned investor, then we're here to expand your reach into alternative investing.
Are you tired of trying to keep ahead in the rat race, only to have so much of your hard-earned money going to the tax collector? Equity doesn't pay the bills. Retirement savings don't pay you now, and there are only 24 hours in a day to work. The only solution is passive income that pays you 24/7 now, not 40 years from now. From vetted investment opportunities to tax saving strategies. Let John guide you through all the confusion and take control of your financial life in pursuit of financial freedom. So sit back, relax, and welcome to the Wealth and Freedom Nexus.
You know, for the most passive returns in real estate investing, I like to put my money with Freedom Family Investments, a team I personally trust because they pay me steady streams of cash flow, hassle-free, all while doing the things I love. Returns are better and more reliable than the stock market, up to 12%. I love that tax benefits offset capital gains or your W-2 income. For a little insider pro tip, knowing who to trust is key to success in investing. Freedom Family Investments has a perfect track record of paying their investors right on time. To learn more, text family to 66866. If you want to invest on autopilot with people I personally trust and with a team who cares about you reaching your financial goals, go ahead and text family to 66866. Hey there, welcome back to another great episode of the WFN podcast. I'm John Rickern, your host, as always, investor, educator, and realtor. I can see above my shoulder, if you're viewing this on YouTube, wfreedomnexus.com. You can go there to see all my resources and podcasts and other educational information that hopefully you can find useful, whether it is growing your income or protecting your businesses or possibly even saving on taxes. Now, I kind of wanted to take a little different step this time where really to kind of appeal to everyone. And when I mean everyone in the United States that has a credit score, bad credit score, good credit score, or possibly no credit score. And this will obviously kind of deal with a little about credit, not just credit cards, but your loans, your student loans, car loans, mortgages, just to name a couple. And I wanted to do this for two reasons. One, so it kind of appealed more to a broad base of users. You know, I know some people have commented, it's like, well, geez, John, I just don't have the resources for real estate investing. And sometimes even came out, it's like, gosh, I'd love to buy an investment property, but my credit score is bad. And just kind of thought, it's like, well, okay, if you're not able to invest, not able to make that leap for the investments, why don't we take a step back and focus on what a credit score is? Now, interesting thing, my guest came on, first heard about him on another podcast, that not all credit scores are equal. This is one thing that I always kind of found interesting. I think everyone out there says like, oh, here is my credit score. And it's usually a 3-digit number. I think the absolute lowest is 350 and then 850 is the highest. Generally speaking, 660 to 680 is kind of where things are good, so to speak, especially in the mortgage world. If you're trying to get a lower interest rate, typically banks like to see at least 720 to 740. that usually gets to be the top end tier for getting the best interest rates. So, if you're out there and wanting to get like a perfect 800, 850 credit score, it's not like if your interest rate on your mortgage is 7% at 740, you're not going to get dropped to 6% if you get all to 850. So after that, it's kind of like going from an A minus to an A to an A plus, just really doesn't make that much of a difference. But I kind of want to touch base on a couple of things with the credit score is that as a nation, we surpassed recently just over 1 trillion in credit card debt. It's actually been the highest since it started tracking in the late 90s, definitely higher than pre-pandemic of 2019. And in conjunction with that, interest rates have definitely gone up. I believe last I looked, the average credit card interest rate is about 24-25%, pretty substantial. So if you're the lender, that's a good thing. You're getting more interest money coming in. If you're the borrower, that's a bad thing. And if you remember from the old rules of the rule of 72, I talked about this in numerous podcasts and talked about this in numerous blog posts, the rule of 72, the quickest way to double your money or how long it takes you to double your money. Take the number 72 and divide the interest rate into it. So just keeping things very simple. If you earn a 10% return on whatever investment, you take 72 divided by 10. Well, in 7.2 years, you should be able to double your money. So look at it from the opposite end. If you're a borrower and you're borrowing that with that interest charges, you are going to be paying almost about double, especially if you just make the minimum payments. So I kind of wanted to bring this up, talk about credit scores, talk about what is all out there. And I actually even learned a few interesting things, especially with Amex or American Express cards, why they may not be the best for helping credit scores versus your Visas and your MasterCards, for instance. So be sure to tune in for this. So my guest this week is Todd Wilson. He is known for crackmycredit.com. He has actually had a lot of industry experience in the mortgage industry, hard money lending. He himself actually had quite a bit of a roadblock, if you will, where back in the financial crisis, had his home foreclosed on, his credit score just plummeted. He actually had no credit, and he's been able to build himself back up or bring himself back. And in doing so, as he learned, how do the various companies, how do they look at credit scores? How do they model it? What do they look at? What's the easiest and quickest things to raise your credit score? What services are legitimate, which are not? And we'll get into that with this podcast, where there's some services that really just waste your money and really don't do anything for repairing your credit or boosting your credit score. So with that, we have Todd Wilson of Crack the Credit Code. He'll be coming on after a word from one of our longtime sponsors.
Check out the website surpasses.com for podcasts, videos, articles, and free e-courses. If you guys have any specific questions, feel free to reach out to the team via email, and we'll get you pointed in the right direction, whether it be an educational course or information about syndication deals. If you haven't read my book, The Journey to Simple Passive Cashflow, click the link below to get a free copy. Thanks to John and the Wealth and Freedom Nexus podcast. Our team is here to help you take the first step, or if you're a seasoned investor, then we're here to expand your reach into alternative investing.
Hey, Todd, thanks for coming on the show, and hopefully we can learn a few things of how to crack your credit score, as you put it.
Well, thanks for having me on, John. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Now, Todd, I actually came across your business and your story from another podcast, and I apologize, I can't remember which one. I listen to them pretty religiously. But for those of my listeners that aren't familiar with Todd Wilson, aren't familiar with Crack the Credit Code, can you kind of give us a brief story of yourself and how you kind of got into the credit score business?
Absolutely. So I started doing mortgages back in 2001. And, before that, I knew literally nothing about credit.
Okay.
Other than the obvious, pay your bills on time, which is such a small fraction of it, So I started to pick up some information. I got a little bit of, good data, and then everything crashed in 2008. My income dropped 80% from one year to the next. And
wow.
Yeah, all my debts were set up based on my higher income. And so, of course, everything went, downhill fast. We lost our house in foreclosure, did bankruptcy, basically had to completely restart. And so for about 3 years, I didn't use credit at all, because I figured, misuse of credit is what got me into the trouble I was in. And so not using it was a good option because then I wouldn't get into that trouble again. The problem is that I started to realize how much that was holding me back because I couldn't buy a car. I couldn't buy a house. I couldn't even rent a car or get a hotel room without a lot of trouble. So I decided I have to get back into the credit game and I have to figure out, initially it wasn't figure, I was find out how to do it. And so I started calling people that should know about credit, all these other people I knew in the mortgage industry, and they didn't. And it was kind of disheartening that I was talking to all these people and nobody had any solutions for me. And finally, it was one of my clients that gave me an idea, said, okay, here's how you get your first new account. And so I went and I did it. And I didn't think I was going to get approved.
Okay.
But I had no other options and I had nothing to lose because at that point, I didn't have any credit anyway. Of course, everybody hates being rejected. So I was still a little bit nervous, but I got approved. And so I got the secured credit card and I used it and then paid it off every month. And after about 8 or 9 months, I decided to check my score. And it was actually the highest it had ever been.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, okay, I'm onto something here, but I don't have all the information I need.
Okay.
And so I decided I didn't want to get into the same trap I did before. So I wasn't just going to go, okay, let's go for it. Build a credit really fast. And, so
open up every line you can.
Exactly. So I did a lot of research online, checking, a lot of different places, checked with people I knew. Because as I had started doing my research, just finding out how to rebuild, I did find people that knew certain things about credit, but nobody had put the whole thing together.
Okay.
And so I started putting together the whole system for myself to use so I didn't get into the same problems that I had before. And an interesting thing happened when I was doing it. I found out that there were 87 million Americans that had bad credit.
Wow.
And I was shocked. And then the second number was the one that really got me. There were 45 million Americans that had no credit score at all. And I went, wait a minute. You add those two numbers, that's more than half the adult population of the U.S. had either bad credit or no credit. And so at that point, I went, okay, well, I have to start sharing this information because obviously I'm not the only one that's ever run into this problem. And I knew that initially, already, but it just became more real to me because I had the numbers in front of me. And then it wasn't until a couple of years later, a friend of mine said, hey, you should write a book. And I went, you know what? You're right. Now I got to figure out how to write a book. So I actually wrote the book, putting all this data together. And even though I put a lot of information in the book, there was even more because I didn't want to make the book unconfrontable.
Okay.
Because you can make a book so long that nobody wants to read it.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody wants to read a 500-page book on credit.
I might be one of the oddballs that do, but yeah, not everyone.
Yeah, I mean, most people are not going to be that interested in it. And so I went, okay, I'm going to keep it relatively short. So it's, less than 110 pages.
Okay.
And I wanted to make it so that it was readable, and relatable, not like dry and boring. And, and I'll tell you the one true test for that was this friend of mine bought the book and then he texted me the next day and said, I finished your book. I literally couldn't put it down.
Wow.
And I was like, nice.
All right. And for those listening, we'll have links to the show notes for Todd's book. If 110 pages or less sounds more intriguing than a 500-page book, this might be one for you to check out. So now, Todd, maybe taking a high level look here, just for kind of bare bones entry. I have listeners all over the nation, all over the country, sophisticated investors, but also beginning investors. For, layman's terms, explain it to a fifth grader. What exactly is a credit score? What's a good one? And, just very high level, what kind of data is taken into that?
Okay. So there's a lot of parts to the answer for that, but
okay.
Credit scores, if there are so many different credit scoring models that are used. I mean, there's different ones for mortgage, for car loans, for credit cards. And there are even different ones that they sell to the public.
Okay, like my FICO and such.
Exactly. So you get your credit score, like let's say you go to Experian, they're going to show you a credit score. It's
Okay.
not the same as when you apply for a loan or a credit card. And, if you go to Credit Karma, it's not even a FICO score.
Really?
It's a Vantage score, it's an alternate score that was developed by the credit bureaus to compete with the FICO score, which is developed by Fair Isaac Company. And they sell their product to all the credit bureaus.
Jeez.
Yeah. So, and FICO scores are used by at least 90% of the creditors out there.
Okay.
So that's the one you really want to pay attention to. But when you get your credit score, even from Credit Karma, what it's doing is it's giving you an idea of what your credit score is going to be.
Okay.
And I'll give you a very real example. So I recently bought a new car, and just before that, I had bought a bunch of stuff on credit cards I knew I was going to spend. And then my wife said, you need to get a new car so we can give your car to our son. So I said, all right. That part wasn't planned. So then I checked on Experian, and they're saying, okay, well, your credit score is 726. I'm like, okay, that should be fine for getting a car. And then I check like one of my credit cards, they give free credit score, and they said you have a 663. I'm like, uh-oh, now I'm in trouble. Wow. Then I go and I get the car, and they pull my credit there, and I go, you have a 750. So that'll give you, that wide range will tell you why you find some people that say, well, they pulled my credit one time and now my score dropped 50 points, which it's not true. Your score cannot drop 50 points from having it pulled one time, but it could be just a different credit scoring model that's being used. And so it's kind of like comparing apples to oranges, although these are apples and oranges that are very closely related.
Okay.
So,
interesting. I didn't know that. I've heard, I have Credit Karma, I check it, but there's been times in the past where applying for a loan, it's like, yep, this is your credit score. Like, oh, that's interesting. That's different, higher or lower than what I saw on my Credit Karma app or whatnot. So having that in place, and I'm just kind of thinking as far as cracking the credit code, let's just say, someone, I'm just throwing out maybe 620 for a credit score, not the best, but they're not sure how that's being pulled. They're not sure what to do. As far as cracking the credit code goes, what can a, non-sophisticated individual consumer do to improve their credit score? What's maybe the best path to, bring that back up?
Well, it's going to depend on what's on their credit report. More than anything. The two biggest areas that are going to affect your score the most are going to be your payment history and your credit usage. Okay. So payment history is there's three basic factors to that. There's recency, meaning what's your recent credit history look like? And if you have late payments, were they really recent? Or are they a little bit further back? Or are they way further back? Okay. So within the last 6 months is going to have the biggest impact on your score. And then 7 to 23 months is going to have the next most. And then 2 years and more, it's going to have less impact. And it's not like this dividing line of all of a sudden, okay, that late payment is now 7 months old. My score is going to drop 30 points. It's more like a gradual increase. But those are the basic areas you want to think with. Okay. Particularly when you're applying for a loan somewhere, they're going to look mostly at the last year and the last 2 years. Gotcha. Because they want to see, okay, well, if you had a late payment last month, they want to know what happened. Sure. And sometimes it's, hey, I switched banks and the auto debit didn't happen. When that happens, sometimes you can get that creditor to remove that late. Especially if it's just a one-time thing. You go into a credit repair, they will never get that late payment removed. Not if it's a month old, but you might be able to, just by using your, pick up your phone, call the creditor, being nice to the person, don't scream at them.
Yeah, don't ignore them, and it just makes it worse. So
yeah, exactly. And then if they can't help you, say, hey, is there a supervisor I can talk to? Because frequently the first person you talk to is, they're a low-level clerk and they can't do anything with it. So that's the first section of your payment history. Okay. The second one is frequency. So how frequent have your late payments or on-time payments been? So let's say you've got 5 accounts and, every month you have 5 payments and they're all on time. And then 1 month, 3 of them are late. So now you've got 3 late payments. So suddenly your frequency of late payments is way up.
Mm.
Whereas if you had, 1 late payment, in the last 5 years, yeah, it's going to affect your score, but it's more of a temporary thing.
Okay.
But if it's happening frequently, then it's not so temporary. It's going to have a more lasting effect.
Okay. Makes
The
sense.
third part is severity, because a 30-day late is not the same as a 60-day late or a 90-day late. So the later it is, the more negative effect it's going to have on your score.
Okay.
So sometimes, if you've got accounts that have, like, let's say you've got a past account, something happened and it got to 90 days late. Well, getting it current is the first step. And if that means you have to work a little overtime or, borrow some money from, a good friend or family member, making sure you can pay it back because you don't want to create more stress.
Not robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Unless you know that you can pay Peter.
Gotcha.
But, getting that account current is going to help you on the road to improving your score.
Okay.
So you got those 3 factors all work together: recency, frequency, and severity.
Gotcha.
So let's say you've got a situation happened and, now you've got 6 accounts, 3 of them have 90-day late payments today.
Okay.
Right now they're 90 days late. So you've got all 3. You've got recent lates. They're very recent because they're current, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got frequent because it's happening right now. And in order to get to 90 days late, you had to go to 60 and 30 also. So you got severity because you got 90 days late. It's pretty severe in a creditor's eyes.
Gotcha.
So when you're looking at things, if you have a situation where you have to make a late payment, you want to look at your accounts and you go, okay, can I restrict it to 1 account, or does it have to be on more than one? And you want to limit it. So let's say, for example, you've got, 4 credit cards and you've got the one with the highest limit has a $300 payment and all the other ones are $50. You're like, I want to pay the biggest one because I can afford that, but I'm going to let the other ones go late. And so it would be actually better to pay the 3 current and let that one go late because it's going to have less of an effect on your score. Because the payment amount makes no difference on how much effect it has on your score.
Okay.
A $15 payment compared to a $15,000 payment. To the credit bureaus, a late payment is a late payment.
Gotcha. Okay. So depending on it, like you said, a 90-day late payment for a $15 payment could have a greater effect than a 30-day late payment on a $15,000 payment. You might think, well, hey, I kept up to date better with the $15,000, but they just look at like, sorry, you have a late payment 90 days.
Exactly. Well, and the funny thing is, for your credit score, that's how it's calculated. But when somebody's lending you money, they may look at it the other way around. They're still going to look at your score, and that can impact what they do or will not do. But they're going to look, like for me doing hard money loans. I look at that and I go, okay, well, the guy had a 15-day hiccup or a $15 hiccup. What happened?
Yeah.
Easy explanation, hey, whatever it was.
Okay.
But as far as your score is concerned, that's another thing.
Gotcha. All right. Now, in regards to the score, Todd, and, obviously we can kind of go down the rabbit hole and go down every single scoring mechanism that is out there in the United States here. But you mentioned a little off camera before we hit record that, right, wrong, or indifferent, like I mentioned in the intro, there's current record amount of credit card debts. Delinquencies are up. Interest rates have obviously skyrocketed. The maybe impulse decision is for people to, I'm going to sign up for one of those credit repair services or credit repair companies that they're going to help repair my credit score. But you mentioned that's not really the case, or that really doesn't have a big effect on their credit score or actual repairing. Can you go into detail on that? For investors seeking DSCR financing, check out timothyhero.com. The guy has closed over 150 DSCR loans in the last 2 years and has been appearing on podcasts and written about by journalists. He's well connected with some of the best lenders in the game and can get you the financing for your rental properties.
Absolutely. So what happens with credit repair is they're addressing your payment history. Specifically, they're addressing late payments. But as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, they can't get the stuff removed that's really recent because the creditor is right there on top of it. They know it was late. If you were late last month, they're like, no, we're not going to remove that.
Yep.
You can send me 1,000 letters and we will not remove it. The easiest stuff for them to remove is the old stuff that has the least effect on your score. And I've had people tell me, well, yeah, I signed up for this credit repair and they got 15 things removed in the last 90 days. I'm like, that's great. How old were they? And, it turns out they were 4, 5, 6 years old.
Wow. Which at that point might not really impact it anyways. So what's the point?
Okay.
Exactly.
And the other flaw with credit repair is that while it's addressing only 35% of your score, which is your payment history, it's really only addressing the late payments and not even talking about on-time payments, because that's part of that too. And I'll give you an example of that. If you have somebody that has one credit card account and then they have a late payment, their credit score could drop 100 points from one late payment quite easily. But if you have somebody that's got 6 credit card accounts, they've had them for 15 years, they've never had a late payment on any of them, and then they have a late payment on one, and they catch it back up, their score is going to drop, but it will also recover much faster because of all these other on-time payments.
Okay.
It's kind of like, when you're a kid playing with toys. Let's say you got a pile of Legos. You got 100 Legos, and the other kid playing with you takes one of them. You don't care. But if you have 2 Legos and he takes one of them, the other one is going at maximum velocity towards his head.
Yep. That's a good analogy. All right. So the credit repair, it could be a marketing gimmick, I hate to say, but may not have as impact on the score as well. From your perspective, what you've seen with your years of history, what do you see as, and I mean, everyone's situation is different. One person might have 6 credit cards. One person has an auto loan, mortgage, student loan. We can't just have like a silver bullet per se, but what have you seen in your experiences, like the maybe quickest and easiest thing to do that is the most beneficial to, maybe the tens of millions of people out there, like you said, that have bad credit?
I'll tell you the number one thing that's probably the fastest way to increase your credit score is getting added as an authorized user to somebody else's account.
Okay.
And basically what that means is that they've got a credit. It's always on credit cards. You're not going to get added to somebody's car loan or mortgage that way.
Right.
But on a credit card, I don't know if there's a credit card company out there that won't add an authorized user. And what you're doing is you're just getting added onto somebody's credit card account.
Okay.
And the way this works is, let's say, you got a parent and they've got good credit, and you ask them, hey, I'm trying to build my credit. Can you add me to one of your credit cards? I don't want the card. Okay. Don't even give me a card.
Just have access. Yeah.
Exactly. That's their first concern is like, oh, well, you got bad credit and you want me to give you a credit card that I'm going to have to pay for. I don't want to deal with that, right? So make it easy on them and just say, look, I don't want the card, but if you can add me to your credit card account as an authorized user, then what happens is you get added to that card, not just today, but for the whole history of the card.
Okay.
And typically the last 7 years of that card's history or any account's history will be on your credit report. So let's say they got their credit card, they've had it for 10, 15 years. The last 7 years is going to show up as history on your credit.
Okay.
And they haven't had a late payment. You haven't had a late payment. They have a high balance. And they use a little bit of it, which is ideal. You don't want, they have a $10,000 limit and they have used $9,800. That account's not going to help you.
Right.
It's like, you're like, great, we solved one problem and created another.
Exactly.
So you get added to that card, but there are a couple things to know about this. First of all, don't do it with an Amex, because Amex will not give you that history.
Interesting.
Yeah, I found this out recently. It's like, no, they don't give you the history. They just add you. Like if they add you on, September 14th, well, your history starts September 14th.
You don't get the history of the authorized or the other person that you're
Exactly.
joining with. Okay.
And then the other thing to know about this, well, actually, there's two more things. One is you can get removed from that account anytime you want. So if that person suddenly has something happen and then, they've used their credit card up to the limit and they've stopped making their payments, you can just get removed, and the entire history of the card is removed from your credit report as if it never happened.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's like an eraser, like a dry erase board. It's just removed. It's just gone, as if it was never there.
Gotcha.
But the other thing is that there are companies out there that will sell this service. Don't do it. I had a client come to me for a loan, and she was trying to get this mortgage on her house. She wanted to handle the situation. I was like, okay, let's look at this. And it turns out she had paid, I think it was like $3,000 or $3,500 to be added to somebody's credit card account.
Wow.
For 3 months. 3 months.
How do I get started in that business?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and there's a problem with that business because the credit card companies hate it.
Okay.
And some of them will cancel the card altogether. So you don't want to be on the side of like taking some of that money either. I mean, I'm sure the company that is setting it up takes most of that money.
Sure.
If they charge $3,000, the guy who's putting his card up probably gets like 500 and they're taking the rest.
Right.
But for 3 months, I mean, that's just ridiculous. If you're going to spend that much money on that, go get a secured credit card with that money.
Okay.
And that way you still have that money. You're not spending it. You're just putting it into a savings account as security for a card. And then, after a few months, you're not going to have a whole history of that other card, but you're also not going to have this problem of throwing away $3,500 unnecessarily.
Okay. Right. So it makes sense. All right. Well, yeah, that's interesting, Todd. I've kind of been self-educated for a lot of things with credit scores, credit reports for quite a while, and I just learned a couple of things. As we get close to the end of this, and again, I want to thank you for taking time of educating my listeners. I know we talked a little bit about your book. Is that something you want to promote a little bit to my listeners, or is there any new products or services or tours that you have going into 2023 into 2024?
Actually, yes. So the book, as you mentioned, Crack the Credit Code. The full title is actually Crack the Credit Code. To play the game, you need to know the rules. And the reason it's titled like that is because as I was doing my research for it, I started to really understand how many rules there were and how little they were known and how hard it was to come by them all and be able to put them together as a cohesive unit to the point where people could actually take this and use it.
Okay.
And so I went, okay, yeah, this is absolutely the case. You have to. And you're not taught this in school because your teachers don't know it. Credit scoring is fairly new. They didn't start actually doing credit scores until the 90s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, the schools don't know it. They can't teach it. Most of our parents didn't know it, so they can't teach it. So where are you going to learn? And you could go through 1,000 YouTube videos and get conflicting information from one to another. And you don't know if this guy's telling the truth, or you see things like anyone can get an 800 credit score in 30 days. Like, no, that's not true.
Right.
It's like saying anybody can build a Ferrari in 3 weeks.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
You can't. But anyway, I actually do have digital courses that are basically done, and I just have to finish doing just a little bit of editing, and those are going to be coming out towards the end of this year, possibly into early 2024.
Okay.
And it all depends on the timing of putting it all together.
Gotcha.
And the whole goal of the courses is to give people more in-depth data and actually additional tools from what's just in the book.
Okay.
That they can use to totally manage their credit and really be at a point where they're causing their credit score and their credit score is not doing something to them.
Okay.
And the book, to promote the book, you can get it, you can get it on Amazon, it's available there. You can also get it much faster as an ebook on my website. And if you get it on my website, which is crackmycredit.com, you also get added to the email list. So you'll be getting additional information about credit. And of course, if you want to opt out, that's absolutely, you're right. But you'll also be getting discounts on further stuff like, the courses and, future courses, because we're also going to roll out more stuff regarding, how to correctly handle your finances. Because another thing I've discovered is that the high school and college accounting classes I took are not really usable for anybody. If you're a Fortune 500 company in 1965, they were great. But now they're not.
Yeah. Well, it's a little, different from the accounting methods for, like you said, a Fortune 500 company versus your general consumer financial habits, spending and whatnot. Is a little bit different on that end. So,
right. And there's tools now. I mean, everybody's got a phone. Everybody's got, a computer of some sort or another, even if it is their phone. So you can do things that, before everything was on paper, you had to keep in 3 different places and match it all up. It's very time wasting,
Exactly.
So. Like, since when do we want to do any one thing 3 times just to make sure that we got it right?
Yeah. Or 4 times or 5 times. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. Well, for those listening, I'll have those links in the show notes. Just again, crackmycredit.com. You can go to that to see all the resources, connect with Todd, get his newsletter, and then hopefully by the end of the year or next year with those learning courses as well. So, Todd, again, thanks for coming on the show of how to crack your credit. I've learned a couple of things as well, and I hope my listeners reach out and continue their credit scoring journey.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me on, John. And I'm glad you learned a couple of things, because that probably means that your listeners did too.
Exactly. So, all right. Well, thanks again, Todd. I appreciate it.
All right. You're welcome.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to share, rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. For more updates, check out www.wealthandfreedomnexus.com. Remember, nothing on this show should be considered tax, legal, investment, or professional advice. This show is produced solely for educational and informational purposes. Please consult an appropriate and licensed tax, legal, real estate, or business professional for specific advice for your situation. For distribution or publication rights or media interviews, please contact the host.